All right, so today we are starting with Shrimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, starting at book 7, Discourse 11. I think it's going to be all day today. Is going to be continuing the spiritual teachings of Devarishi Narada to Maharaja Yudhishthira at his Rajasuya, his coronation ceremony.
Hey Devana, I have one request. In an hour, I have to go. I want to watch Rajanadaram talking about how to deal with grief. It's it's very interesting. And right after that, we'll talk about his book. So 12 o'clock my time, I think 10 o'clock your time. I will be off, but then I will be watching it on the record. So you can move. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Discourse 11 is entitled An Inquiry into Right Conduct. And that's Inquiry into Right Conduct is kind of the heading of the next whole bunch of discourses. The whole rest of book 7, in fact. Sri Shuka began again. Having heard the narrative celebrated by assemblies of pious souls of the ruler of the Daityas, the leader of most exalted souls, whose mind was fixed on the Almighty Lord Vishnu, Yudhishthira, full of joy, further inquired of the son of the self-born. Yudhishthira said, O divine personage, I am anxious to hear about the eternal dharma, the Sanatana dharma, prescribed for men, along with the ethical code governing the Varnas and Ashramas, by following which a human being reaches the supreme. You are a son of no other than the Prajapati, the highest deity, the most beloved of his sons, O Holy One, by virtue of your asceticism, concentration of mind, and deep meditation. Kind-hearted, pious, and tranquil Brahmanas like you, devoted to Lord Narayana, know the highest virtue, which is a secret. Not so others, like the lawgivers, the compilers of the Smritis, like Manu Smriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti, and so on. So that's why he's asking Narada. Narada resumed, bowing to gain the favor of the birthless Lord, the promoter of righteousness among the people, I shall expound the Sanatana Dharma as learnt from the lips of the sage Narayana, who, taking his avatarana along with his part manifestation, the sage Nara, from Dharma, from Dharmadeva, through his wife Murti, is, as a matter of fact, practicing austerities in his hermitage at Badrinatha for the good of the people. The source of and the authority on Dharma really are Lord Sri Hari, the embodiment of all the Vedas, the body of codes handed down by those well-versed in the Vedas, O Yudhishthira, and the feeling of self-satisfaction as well as the conduct of the virtuous. The highest virtue of all men, by which the soul of the universe is pleased, has been duly proclaimed, O king, as consisting of the following 30 features: truthfulness, compassion, austerity, austerity meaning the performance of fasting, etc., purity, endurance, discrimination of right from wrong, control of mind and the senses, non-violence, continence, charity, muttering prayers, straightforwardness, contentment, service of those who look upon all with the same eye, meaning service rendered in the attitude of looking on all with the same eye, service to all equally, gradually withdrawing from mundane activity, pondering the contrary result of men's actions, contrary to their goal. In other words, noticing that actions aimed at milking pleasures out of the material world also produce the contrary result of entangling men in suffering. Refraining from useless talk, inquiry into the self, equitable distribution among created beings according to their worth of rice and other eatables, etc., and regarding them, particularly human beings, as one's own self or as deities, O son of Pandu. hearing and chanting of and dwelling on the names and glories of, waiting upon, worshiping and bowing to, offering the fruit of one's action performed in the spirit of service to, treating as one's bosom friend, and dedicating oneself to the Lord, the goal of exalted souls. A dvija, or twice-born, meaning one who has received the sacred thread, referring to Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, is he in whose family the purificatory rites have been performed in unbroken succession, and whom the birthless creator has denominated as such. Performance of sacrifices, study and charity, as well as the duties prescribed for the 4 ashramas of life, have been enjoined on the dvija that are pure by birth and conduct. Meaning that anyone whose family has not maintained the performance of all the 16 sanskaras is not held to the obligations of the dharma shastras, just to like, they can do dharma and sadhana, etc., but the obligations of the dvijas are not necessarily upon them. Study of the scriptures and so on, performance of sacrifices and charity, teaching, officiating as a priest at sacrifices, and receiving gifts from those whose earnings are free from blemish, which are recommended as a means of subsistence, are the 6 duties of a brahmana. So 3 of them are obligatory duties and 3 are optional. The obligatory duties of a brahmana are to perform yajnas, to do charity, and to study the scriptures. The other 3 things which they can do but do not have to do is teach, officiate at priests, at yajnas for other people, and accept gifts. Non-acceptance of gifts is the rule for the next, the kshatriya. So kshatriyas are allowed to teach and are allowed to officiate as a priest, but are not allowed to accept gifts. Maintenance is to be sought by a kshatriya, protecting the people, optionally by recovering taxes and fines from his subjects other than a brahmana. A vaishya, in other words, that brahmanas are exempt from taxes, generally speaking. A vaishya, as a matter of fact, should make his living by agriculture, breeding of cattle, trade and usury, and should always follow the lead of the brahmana race. Service to the twice-born classes has been enjoined upon the shudra, meaning working for wages, a member of the laboring and artisan classes. And service to his master has been ordained as his means of subsistence too, that his master should provide him with living wages and food. His employer is how we would put it in a modern sense. Occupation of various kinds, such as agriculture, cattle breeding, trade, and so on, accepting gifts without the impudence of asking, begging food grains daily in the life of a vagrant mendicant, and gathering ears of corn left by the owner while reaping the harvest, or gleaning food grains lying scattered in a grain market after the heaps have been sold off or removed. This is the 4-fold means of livelihood sanctioned for a brahmana. Again, each succeeding one is preferable to the preceding. So the best way for a brahmana to make their living is by picking up scrap grains abandoned in fields or markets, which is extremely hard. Slightly less meritorious but acceptable is to beg for them, than to accept gifts and then to engage in occupations like agriculture, cattle breeding, or trade. Brahmanas can do that. With the exception of a kshatriya, a man belonging to a lower grade should not adopt a higher vocation except in distress. But a kshatriya can adopt the means of livelihood of a brahmana other than the accepting of gifts. In distress, however, all sorts of vocations are open to all without distinction. One may live by rata and amrata, or by mrata and pramrata. So this means that living by mrata and pramrata means living by death. That in distress, he's saying it's okay to kill other beings, meaning like you could hunt, eat meat, engage in warfare, and so on. If it's in distress, then you do what you have to do. One may live by satyanvrata, but under no circumstance by svavritti, literally a dog's living, but essentially meaning with the abandonment of any principle of dharma. That is done under no circumstance. Gathering ears of corn left by the owner while reaping a harvest, or gleaning food grains lying scattered in a grain market after the heaps have been sold off or removed, is called rita. That which is got unasked is called amrita. Daily begging is mrita, while agriculture is pramrita. Pramrita literally called the greater death, because agriculture necessarily involves the destruction of so many living beings, like small, like mice and worms and such in the soil during plowing, and obviously the mass killing of plants in the harvest and so on. Trade is satyanrata, meaning a mixture of truth and falsehood, since there's inevitably going to be deception in advertising and marketing and so on. And deception is an innate part of how trade and commerce work. While service rendered to those belonging to a lower grade is what's called a dog's living. A brahmana as well as a kshatriya should always shun this detested calling. A brahmana is an embodiment of all the Vedas, while a ruler of men is the personification of all the devas. Control of mind and the senses, austerity, purity, contentment, forgiveness, straightforwardness, wisdom, compassion, devotion to the immortal Lord, and veracity are the characteristics of a brahmana. A martial spirit, valor, fortitude, audacity, liberality, self-control, forgiveness, devotion to the brahmana race, benignity, and protection of the weak constitute the characteristics of a kshatriya. Devotion to the gods, to one's guru, and to the immortal Lord, promotion of the three objects of human pursuit, being dharma, artha, and kama, or sensual enjoyment, belief in the existence of God, in life after death, and so on, constant exertion for the acquisition of wealth, and dexterity in acquiring it are the characteristics of a Vaishya. Submissiveness, purity, guilelessly ministering to one's master, performance of the 5 daily yajnas, unaccompanied by mantras, non-thieving, truthfulness, and protection of cows and brahmanas are indeed the characteristics of a Shudra. So the 5 daily yajnas that the Shastras call for Shudras to perform involve reciting the name of the gods, etc., offering oblations with the Namaha mantra instead of the higher. So they're doing Smritya yajna rather than Srota yajna from the Vedas. And the duty of women, looking upon their husband as a deity, is to serve him, to do good offices to him, to humor his relations, and constantly to observe his sacred vows. Herself remaining adorned and keeping her utensils, etc., well scoured at all times, a virtuous wife should serve her husband by thoroughly sweeping her house and plastering it with cow dung, etc. Plastering the floors with fresh cow dung is how they treated earthen floors. Still do in much of India. By drawing auspicious diagrams and spherical designs on the floor with colors, rangoli, through sense objects, great and small, desired by him, through modesty and control of the senses, through truthful and agreeable words, and through love at opportune moments. Contented and not coveting even that which is available, diligent, conversant with dharma, agreeable and truthful of speech, not only to her husband, but to all, vigilant, pure and full of affection, she should gratify her husband unless he is fallen. Fallen means guilty of any of the 5 major sins of killing a brahmana, being an alcoholic, thieving, committing adultery, especially with the wife of one's guru, or assisting anyone else in these crimes. Meaning that if he's engaged in serious crime or an abusive alcoholic or so on, then it is no longer the duty of a wife to be loyal to him. She should take actions to stop him. A wife who serves her husband, regarding him as an image of Sri Hari and devoted to him as goddess Lakshmi is to her consort, rejoices in Vaikunta like Sri in the company of her husband, who is sure to attain a form similar to that of Sri Hari by virtue of her devotion. The calling of mixed races, such as the Antyajas and Antevasais, those who live on the outskirts or so on, other than those who are thieves and given to sinful pursuits, should be the same as has been followed in their respective families. So in other words, if you're not born into the Varnashrama society of India, if you're from some other culture, then unless your ancestors are thieves or otherwise harmful, then follow your family and ancestral traditions. Generally, the course of conduct determined by the innate disposition of men in all ages has been declared by men whose eye is the Veda as conducive to happiness both here and hereafter, O Yudhishthira. So in other words, go with your innate disposition, that which feels right to you. A man following a vocation determined by his natural disposition and discharging his duties bids fair to attain by degrees the state of a gunakita, one who has transcended the three gunas, relinquishing eventually even his natural pursuits and becoming fully renounced. Being repeatedly sown, a field will automatically become sterile one day. It will no more be capable of yielding any crops. It may be that the seed sown in it will perish. Even so, by overindulgence in the objects of senses, the mind, the seat of desires, is sure to eventually get fully disgusted with them, okay, but not so by driblets of enjoyment, like fire, meaning that if you drop occasional drops of ghee in a fire, it'll keep going and just keep getting bigger. But if you douse it with a huge bunch of ghee at once, you can put it out. If what has been declared to be a characteristic of the grade in society of a man is perceived even in another, the latter should be distinctively called by that very denomination. So in other words, moving, this explicitly endorses moving varnas. If someone's true characteristics are those of a different varna or a different grade in society, regardless of their birth, then they are that grade. Thus ends the 11th discourse, entitled An Inquiry into Right Conduct, forming part of the dialogue between Emperor Yudhishthira and the sage Narada, in Book 7 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 12 continues the inquiry. Narada continued, dwelling in the house of his teacher, humble as a servant, with his senses controlled, and doing him good offices and bearing the strongest affection for him, a brahmachari should worship in the evenings and mornings his guru, the sacred fire, the sun god, and Lord Vishnu, the chief of the gods, as well as the deities presiding over both the twilights and noontide, silently muttering the holy Gayatri mantra with a concentrated mind. So when we say silently muttering, we mean manasika japa, mentally, not pronounced out loud. Well regulated, he should learn the Vedas from his guru, if called to do so, and should bow, touching the guru's feet with his head at the beginning as well as at the end of his lessons. Carrying the kusha grass in his hands, he should wear a girdle of the species of rushes called munja, deerskin and 2 pieces of cloth, the sacred thread, and keep his hair unkempt, and should carry a staff and a kamandalu, a water pot made of a coconut shell, as enjoined by the scriptures. When we say as enjoined by the scriptures, it means refer to the Dharma Shastras for further detail. For example, that the staff should be, if the student's a Brahmana, then the staff should be made of the wood of the palasha tree and so on. There's further details that you can look up. Evening and morning, he should go about begging for food and offer it to the guru. He should partake of it if allowed, if not permitted on any day. For example, if it's the Ekadashi day, then he should fast. Possessing a good moral character, moderate in diet, active, reverent, and exercising control over his senses, he should deal with women as well as with those enslaved by women, only as much as it is necessary. Anyone other than a householder who has undertaken the great vow of continence should shun talk of women. The senses, which are very turbulent, forcibly carry away the mind. An adult student should never have the combing of his hair, massaging and washing his body, and inunction, etc., done by the young wives of his gurus. It is a truism indeed that a young woman is like fire, and a man a jar full of ghee. One should avoid even one's daughter when all by herself. At other times, too, one should remain with her so long as it is necessary. Until one has mastered his self, having apprehended through self-realization that all this is illusory, the sense of duality does not cease. From that, indeed, follows the perversity of the embodied soul, through identification with the body and material things. All this has been enjoined upon a householder, even more so on a recluse. Service to one's guru is optionally laid down in the case of a householder. So a householder may or may not have a guru. A householder who is expected to approach his wedded wife during the period favorable for procreation. Those who have undertaken a vow of continence should give up the use of collyrium, inunction, massaging the body, fellowship with women, drawing, meat, spirituous liquor or alcohol, garlands, perfumes, unguents, and ornaments. Having thus lived in a guru's house and studied and grasped the import of the three Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, and Sama Veda, normally they would not learn the Atharva Veda, a different class of priests learn that, along with the sciences auxiliary to them, the Vedangas, and the Upanishads, according to his eligibility and capacity, and having made available to the guru, if capable of doing so, the object of the guru's desire, as Guru Dakshina, and permitted by the guru, he should enter, according to his predilections and fitness, the life of a householder, marry and beget children, or retire to the woods, take to the life of an anchorite, or renounce the world and wander forth as an ascetic mendicant recluse, or continue there in the guru's house as a lifelong celibate student. He should visualize Lord Vishnu as having taken up his abode in the sacred fire, the guru, his own self, as well as the elements, including the living beings dwelling in the elements, as their inner controller, even though he has not really entered them, having already been present in them by virtue of his pervading everything as their very cause. Following the rules of conduct laid down for his ashrama, and having come to know that which ought to be known, a brahmachari, anchorite, recluse, or householder of this type realizes the transcendent absolute. I shall tell the rules of conduct prescribed for a vanaprastha and approved of by sages, by following which in this life an ascetic bids fair to ascend easily after death to Maharloka, the realm of the rishis. An anchorite, literally one who has taken vanaprastha dharma, having retired from householder life, or skipped it entirely, must not eat anything which ripens on cultivated soil, so no products of agriculture, and not even the products of uncultivated land before time. He should neither eat food cooked on fire, nor anything raw, but only that which has ripened under the sun. He should prepare charu, which is an oblation of rice, barley, and pulse boiled with butter and milk, and purodasha, a mass of ground rice rounded into a kind of cake and divided into pieces to place on separate receptacles, and joined at different times for being offered to the gods through the sacred fire with wild corns. Each time a fresh, natural supply of cereals and other eatables is obtained, he should, however, reject the old stock. So anytime he obtains food, he should get rid of whatever food he had with him. Himself enduring snow, winds, fire, rain, and the heat of the sun, he should betake himself to a shelter in the form of a hut of leaves or a mountain cave, only for the sake of preserving the sacred fire. Wearing matted locks of hair, preserving the other hair, in other words, not shaving his armpits or his pubic hair, which some ancient Indian men did. It was customs to shave the body. As well as the other hair on his body, nails, mustaches, and beard, and the dirt on his skin, and keeping with him a kamandalu, water pot made of a coconut shell or a gourd, deer skin wrapped about his loins, a staff, the bark of birch trees as a covering for the rest of his body, and the accessories of fire worship as his only possessions. A hermit should practice austerities in the woods for 12, 8, 4, or 2 years, or 1 year, lest his reason should get perverted through hardship. So 12 years is the maximum, but you can do less if you can't mentally handle the lifestyle for that long. So there's a footnote mentioning that one should preserve the dirt on his skin. This should not be taken to mean that an anchorite is forbidden to take his bath, or that he is asked to remain positively unclean or allow dirt to accumulate on his body. What is sought to be conveyed by all these restrictions is simply this, that he should be unmindful of his exterior, that he should not devote particular attention to cleanliness, etc., that his bodily needs should be reduced to the minimum, and that he should completely subordinate his physical self to the higher self. So not worry if he's dirty, but not like deliberately never clean any dirt off his body. When incapable through ailments or old age of performing his duties, and even of pursuing the knowledge of the spirit in this way, he should resort to fasting, etc. It is laid down in Discourse 13 that even after completing the maximum period of 12 years, an anchorite should continue to practice austerities in the woods if he is still able-bodied and fit to perform his religious duties. Or if he is no longer fit for such austerities, he should enter the fourth stage and lead the life of a sannyasi. If he is no longer fit for the physical rigors of the forest, but is still intellectually fit and mentally alert enough to pursue the knowledge of the spirit. When he finds himself both physically and mentally unfit for such extreme rigor, then he is advised to adopt the course suggested in these following verses. He should resort to fasting, withdrawing the sacred fires into himself, which means extinguishing the physical sacred fire and internalizing it, and giving up the feeling of identification with the body, as well as the feeling that the body, etc., are mine. He should mentally merge his psychophysical organism in its causes, assigning each constituent to its proper place. A wise man should merge the apertures of his body, the eyes, ears, nostrils, mouth, and the organs of urination and defecation, in ether. The 5 vital airs in the cosmic air, the heat of the body into the fire tattva, the blood, phlegm, and pus, etc., into water, and the rest solid matter such as bones, flesh, and so on in earth, everything being consigned back to its origin. He should merge his organ of speech along with the function of speaking into the god Agni. The 2 hands, as well as the function of grasping and releasing things, in Indra. The feet, along with the function of locomotion, in Lord Vishnu conceived in the form of the time spirit. The faculty of procreation, along with sexual enjoyment, in Prajapati. And the organ of defecation, as well as the act of voiding excrements, in Mrityu, the god of death. Directing each organ and its function to its proper place, the deity presiding over it. He should merge the sense of hearing, along with sound itself, all sound that he hears, in the deities presiding over the quarters. The tactile sense, as well as touch itself, in the wind god. And the colors, along with the faculty of vision, in the sun god, the source of light, O Yudhishthira. He should merge the palate, along with the tastes, in the deity presiding over water. The olfactory sense, along with the various smells, into the goddess presiding over the earth. Manas, the mind, along with the objects of the mind, in the moon god. Buddhi, or understanding, along with the objects capable of being understood, in Brahma, the highest and the earliest seer, the Adirishi or Adikavi. Actions along with self-consciousness in Rudra, from whom proceeds all action prompted by egotism and self-interest. The chitta, or the reason, along with sattva, or consciousness itself, in the deity presiding over chitta, who is Lord Vasudeva, and the jiva, along with the three gunas, in the transcendent Brahman. He should merge earth and water, water and fire, fire and air, that in ether, and that in ahankara, the principle of self-consciousness, the latter in mahatattva, the principle of cosmic intelligence, that in the unmanifest prakriti, or primordial matter, and that into the indestructible Brahman. Recognizing the self left in the form of absolute consciousness by this process of eliminating all its vestures as the indestructible Brahman, the one irreducible element is pure consciousness, and thus remaining without a second, he should cease functioning, even like fire that has consumed all of its fuel. Thus ends the 12th discourse, entitled An Inquiry into Right Conduct, forming part of the dialogue between Emperor Yudhishthira and the sage Narada in Book 7 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 13, the course of conduct prescribed for a sannyasi, and a dialogue between an avadhuta and prahrada. Narada began again. He, however, who is fit, should enter the life of a recluse in the aforesaid manner, and with the body alone left to him, and free as his possession, and free from all desires, he should roam about on the globe, observing the rule of staying only one night in a particular village. If he should put on any covering, he should wear only a strip of cloth to cover the privy parts, and should not, except in times of distress, carry anything that he has renounced, other than the distinguishing marks of a sannyasi, which are a staff and the kamandalu pot. Living on alms, delighting in his own self, shelterless, friendly to all living beings, tranquil and devoted to Lord Narayana, he should go about all alone, without any companion. He should view this universe as dwelling in his immutable self, transcending cause and effect, and himself as the transcendent Brahman, interpenetrating the whole universe, consisting of cause and effect. With his eyes turned towards the self, he should discover the true nature of the self at the point of conduct, between deep sleep and waking life, and look upon both bondage and release from bondage as a mere illusion and not real. He should neither welcome death, which is inevitable, nor life, which is uncertain. He should only await the course of time, which is responsible for the birth and death of created beings. He should never indulge in profane literature, meaning any literature not treating of spiritual subjects, nor should he make his living by any profession. He should avoid controversial reasoning and should never espouse any particular cause. He should not attach disciples to himself, nor should he study many a book. He should neither take to discoursing, nor should he engage in undertakings on any account. All right, sorry about that. I think we're back. So he should, such a dedicated wandering sannyasi, should neither take to discoursing, he should not be giving spiritual lectures, nor should he engage in undertakings, such as the construction of a monastery or so on any account. In the case of a high-souled recluse, tranquil by nature and equable of mind, observance of the rules of conduct prescribed for the particular ashrama is not generally intended to secure religious merit or punya. When spiritual enlightenment is attained, he may continue to observe such conduct and retain the emblems of his ashrama, or may give it up. Though no outward sign of his greatness or of his being such a realized sannyasi may be visible to others, his object in life should be quite evident. Though intelligent, he should show himself as though he were a madman or a fool, and though wise, he should show himself as dumb in the eyes of the people. On this very point, the wise narrate the following old legend consisting of a dialogue between the Asura Raja Prahrada and the ascetic Lord Dattatreya, who was following the mode of life of a python. So Dattatreya here is, keep in mind, an avatar. So when we say following the mode of life of a python is thus represented to be an unwieldy creature capable of little locomotion and catching its prey with its jaws and devouring prey only when it falls within easy reach. So what it means to follow the mode of life of a python is that you remain lying down on the bare ground in an open space all the time, stirring on no account and making no effort even to pick up food if offered. One is supposed to answer the calls of nature in that very posture. So urinate and defecate on yourself, lying on the ground in a puddle. And accept food only when it is literally put into his mouth by someone. Such a person is practically dead to the world and drags his existence, drags on his existence only to work out the prarabdha karma. Only a jnani of the highest order who has lost all consciousness of the body as self, and to whom life and death are alike, can even think of following this extreme mode of life. Going about the worlds with intent to ascertain the truth concerning the people and accompanied by a few ministers, Prahlada, the beloved of the Lord, saw him lying on the ground on the sloping side of the Sahyadri hills, which are the hills today known as the Western Ghats, in the southwest coastal area of India, along the bank of the Kaveri River, his spotless glory concealed by his limbs being covered with dust. By his conduct, appearance, speech, and marks indicative of grade in society and stage in life, people could not be sure about him that he was so-and-so, nor that he was not so-and-so. No one's really sure who or what he is. Having greeted, and he is inferred only to be Dattatreya, because in one of the other books, it says that Dattatreya taught the science of the spirit to Prahlada. And so it is assumed that this is what that was referring to, and that this Avadhuta was Dattatreya. Having greeted and duly worshipped him and touching his feet with his head, the Asura Raja, the eminent devotee of the Lord, who was eager to know the truth, asked the following question. You carry a robust body, like one given to exertion and enjoying the comforts of life. Wealth is the lot of only those who exert themselves, while enjoyment in this world falls to the lot of the moneyed. Indeed, the corporeal frame of those who are given to luxuries grows fat, not otherwise. Lying supine as you do, O Holy One, you surely and obviously own no riches, from which alone follows such enjoyment. Tell us, if you deem fit, O Brahmana, the reason why this body of yours is corpulent, even though you indulge in no luxury. Learned, able-bodied, endowed with a penetrating vision, and possessing a wonderful and charming eloquence, you remain lying down undisturbed while the world is doing work, even though you perceive everything clearly. Narada continued, directly questioned thus by the ruler of the Daityas and captivated by his nectar-like speech, the great ascetic smilingly addressed him. The Brahmana replied, esteemed as you are of the righteous, O chief of the Asuras, you undoubtedly know by your spiritual insight the consequences of men's activity and cessation from activity. Ever present in your heart by virtue of your absolute devotion, the glorious Lord Narayana dispels your ignorance even as the sun disperses darkness. Nevertheless, O king, we answer your questions in the light of what we have heard. For you deserve to be respected by those seeking the purification of the heart. Impelled to actions by the stream of avidity, which brings in its train a succession of births and which cannot be sated with adequate enjoyments, I have been thrown into various wombs. Wandering about by force of actions, I have been luckily endowed with this body, which leads to heaven, to final moksha, to the lower order of beings, and to this life again, depending on what course is taken. Perceiving in this life, too, the frustration of married couples undertaking pursuits for happiness and driving away calamities, I have ceased from all activity. Bliss constitutes the essence of this self, and cessation from all activity is the medium of the manifestation of bliss. Realizing enjoyments to be the creation of fancy, I remain lying down, reaping the fruit of destiny. Thus forgetting the object of its pursuit, happiness, which is the essence of its being and is eternally dwelling in it, the jiva actually undergoes transmigration, consisting of diverse states of existence, and terrible, through duality, which is really non-existent. As an ignorant man impelled by the longing for water may run after a mirage, leaving actual water covered with duckweeds, etc., sprung from that water, a man seeking happiness elsewhere than his own self runs after the objects of the senses. Fruitless are the actions repeatedly done by him who, though unaided by providence, seeks through his body, etc., which are controlled by fate, happiness and cessation of suffering for himself. What will be done by riches and objects of desire, got with hardship, to a mortal who is never free from bodily and other affliction? So in other words, no matter how rich you are, your body may break down. Your body will eventually for sure break down. You'll become unhealthy. You'll eventually die. Riches can't stop this. At least not for long. I perceive the torment of moneyed men who are avaricious, whose mind is uncontrolled and who get no sleep for fear, greatly apprehensive as they are of everybody. To those possessed of life and wealth, there is apprehension from the king, from thieves, the enemy, kinsmen, beasts and birds, beggars, death, and even their own self. A wise man should give up the craving for life and wealth, from which follow grief, infatuation, fear, anger, attachment, unmanliness, and exertion, etc., to men. The very best among our teachers in this world are the bee and the python, by whose example we have acquired dispassion and contentment. Killing the owner, another may usurp even his hard-earned wealth, like the honey that has been collected by the bee with great pains. Aversion from all objects of desire has been learnt by me, from the bee. Like a python, I remain effortless and contented in mind with whatever is got by chance. If I get nothing, I remain lying for many days, depending on my own strength. Now I eat a scanty fare and now plentiful, no matter whether it is delicious or tasteless. Now I partake of a meal rich in many qualities, and now gulp worthless provender. Sometime I eat food offered with reverence, while at other times I eat food which is served without honor. At some places I eat even after having eaten, while other times I eat by day or by night, according to chance. Enjoying what is ordained by fate and contented in mind, I put on silk or linen, deerskin or rags, the bark of trees, or even other fabric that may be easily obtained. Now I lie down on the earth's surface, and now on straws, leaves, a slab of stone, or ashes. Now I repose on a quilt, stretched on a bedstead inside a palace, in compliance with another's will. Sometimes having bathed and besmeared my body with sandal paste and finely dressed, nay, wearing a garland and decked with jewels, I drive in a chariot, or ride on horseback or on an elephant. While at other times, O king, I roam stark naked like an evil spirit. I neither revile nor eulogize men who are diverse of disposition. On the other hand, I wish them welfare in the shape of their unity of being with the Supreme Spirit. One should merge the notion of diversity in the mental faculty of perceiving such diversity, and that faculty in the mind, which is responsible for our misconception of things. Merging the mind in the sattvika aspect of the ego, he should then merge the latter into the maya. A contemplative soul should merge the said maya in the self-conscious Brahman, and then fixing his eyes on the supreme reality and established in that self-conscious supreme spirit and devoid of effort, he should become actionless. In this way, since you are beloved of the Lord, I have told you about my own conduct, although it is very mysterious and repugnant to secular and Vedic canons. Narada went on. Having attentively heard from the sage an account of the course of conduct prescribed for ascetics of the highest order, and after worshipping him and taking his permission, the Lord of the Asuras returned thence to his home full of delight. Thus ends the 13th discourse, forming part of the dialogue between Emperor Yudhishthira and the sage Narada, and bearing on the course of conduct prescribed for a recluse in Book 7 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 14, in Inquiry into Right Conduct, continued. Yudhishthira submitted. O Devarishi, tell me the method by which a householder like me, whose mind is excessively attached to his household, may easily attain the said state. Since these intense forms of renunciation do not appeal to Yudhishthira. Narada replied, staying in his house, O king, and performing the duties proper to the life of a householder as an offering to Lord Vishnu himself for his pleasure alone, expecting no reward for them. A man should wait upon great sages, devotees of the Lord. Surrounded by men who are tranquil by nature and reverently hearing again and again, according to his leisure, the nectar-like stories of the Lord's avataranas, he should gradually give up, through the fellowship of saints, attachment to his body, wife, progeny, etc., who are themselves going to be severed from him by death. As he who has woken from a dream gives up attachment to the objects in the dream. Serving his body and household only to the extent it is necessary to do so, and appearing like one attached to them, though inwardly disgusted, or disgusted is a strong word, but very much unattached. A wise man should exhibit humanity in the midst of men. So among other people, he should behave like an ordinary man. Not recognizing anything as his own, he should give his assent to whatever his kinsmen, parents, sons, brothers, and other relations say, and whatever they desire. A wise man should do this while enjoying the wealth acquired by the grace of the Lord, as well as that obtained from the earth, nay, that got as a windfall, everything having been produced by the immortal Lord. That much constitutes the due of living beings, with which their belly may be filled. He who claims more is a thief and deserves punishment, who tries to who does not simply take the wealth that comes to him dharmically, but who tries to forcibly take it from others. He should look upon deer, camels, donkeys, monkeys, rats, reptiles, birds, and even flies as though they were their own children. What is that which distinguishes these? From those other creatures from one's own children? Even a householder should not seek after the three objects of human pursuit with great pains, but only as much as has been assigned by fate and with due regard to place and time. He should unsparingly divide in due proportion objects of enjoyment among all, including dogs, sinful creatures, and those belonging to the lowest strata of society, those living at the outskirts of a town or a village. He should allow those deserving of service the use even of his only wife, whom people regard as their possession. The use of his wife meaning her friendship, her services, allow her to wait upon them, and so on. Do not jealously guard anything. The Lord who is conquered by none is veritably conquered by him who relinquishes his claim on that wife for whose sake a man is prone to lay down his own life or to kill his own father and guru. How despicable is this worthless body, which is sure to be reduced in the end to the state of worms, or converted into ordure or into ashes, and equally despicable is the body of a wife who is loved for the sake of such a body. And how exalted is this soul, our real self, which is all pervading, covers the entire universe by its glory. A householder should sustain himself with articles obtained by force of destiny, and left after the performance of the 5 great yajnas, the respectful offerings made to the animal kingdom, to human beings, to the ancestors, to the rishis, and to the gods. Foregoing his claim on everything else, so in other words, should eat the prasadam of these 5 yajnas. Foregoing his claim on everything else, a wise man bids fair to attain the position of exalted souls. With the wherewithal earned through one's own vocation, he should daily worship the Purusha, separately in the form of the gods, the divine intelligences presiding over the various departments of nature, the rishis, the human beings, the animal kingdom, the spirits of the departed, and his own self. When all the requisites for the performance of a sacrifice, including his eligibility for it, are forthcoming, he should worship the deity by means of oblations poured into the sacred fire, and other sacrificial rites in accordance with the procedure laid down in the sacred texts detailing such procedure. Indeed, the said Almighty Lord, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, is not so fully propitiated by oblations offered through the sacrificial fire, O Yudhishthira, as by offerings in the shape of morsels of cooked food dropped into the mouth of a Brahmana. Therefore, worship the aforesaid Lord, the inner controller of all, through the Brahmanas and the gods, as well as through other human beings and other living creatures, after the Brahmanas, according to their respective worth, through various objects of enjoyment that you should give to them. A Dvija possessed of the wherewithal should perform in the lunar month of Praushtapada, which is Bhadrapada or Ashvina, depending on whether you count by the start of the waning or the start of the waxing of the moon. According to his means, the Sraddha of the dark fortnight, known by the name of the Mahalaya Sraddha, in honor of his deceased parents, as well as of their relations and others. He should perform their Sraddha at the time of the summer and winter solstices and the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, during a particular astronomical division of time called Vyatipata, on the day when a Tithi begins and ends without one sunrise or between two sunrises, during a lunar or solar eclipse, on a 12th lunar day, as well as during the period when the constellations known by the name of Sravana, Dhanishta, and Satabhisha are ascendant, on the 3rd lunar day of the bright half of the lunar month of Vaishakha, as well as on the 9th lunar day of the bright half of Kartika, on the 4 Ashtakas, the 8th lunar days of the dark fortnight, during the seasons known by the name of Hemanta and Shishira, which are the months of Margashirsha, Pausha, Magha, and Palguna, on the 7th lunar day of the bright fortnight of the month of Magha, on the full moon day of the month of Magha, when the constellation Magha is ascendant, even when the constellations associated with the other lunar months appear on a full moon, or even when the moon rises 1 digit less than the full on that day, on any 12th lunar day when the constellations of Anuradha, Sravana, and any of the 3 constellations associated with the name of Uttara, which are Uttara Palguni, Uttara Shadha, and Uttara Bhadrapada, are ascendant, or when the 11th lunar day of any month is conjoined with any of these constellations, and lastly on any day when the constellation under which one was born, or the constellation of Sravana, is ascendant. So this is a long list of appropriate days to perform the Sraddha rite. So there's tons and tons of options throughout the year when you can do this rite. These aforesaid periods are suitable not only for Sraddha, but for all virtuous acts to be performed by men, inasmuch as they enhance to a large extent the merit of the performer. One should practice virtue in any form or shape on all these days with all one's being, for there lies the fruitfulness of one's life. Ablution, japa, homa, any sacred vow and worship of the gods and the brahmanas that may be undertaken, and any gift that may be made to the ancestors, the gods, to living human beings and other living beings on these occasions, surely become imperishable, bring everlasting good. One should undertake such acts of virtue, even when the time comes for the performance of any purificatory rite, for the benefit of one's wife or son, nay, of one's own self, the cremation of a dead body, and the death anniversary of one's parents and others, and also on the occasion of any other ceremony intended to perform one's welfare, O Yudhishthira. Now I shall fully enumerate the places conducive to religious merit and other good. That is unquestionably the most sacred tract where can be found a worthy man, the very likeness of the Almighty Lord, in whom dwells the whole of this creation, animate as well as inanimate, and where stays the Brahmana race endowed with austerity, learning, and compassion. That area is the abode of blessings, wherever there is an image of Sri Hari, and where there are rivers like the Ganga celebrated in the Puranas and other sacred works. Lakes such as Pushkara and sacred spots inhabited by venerable souls, Kurukshetra, Gaya, Prayaga, the hermitage known by the name of Shalagrama Kshetra of the sage Pulaha, the forest of Naimisha, Palguna, where the Kanya Tirtha, which is Kanyakumari on the south coast of India, the southern point of India. The holy bridge of Sri Rama at Rameshwaram across to Lanka. Prabhasa, also called Shankhodhara, where the Somanatha temple is. And Kushastali, which is Dwaraka, Varanasi, Mathura, Lake Pampa, and Bindusara, on whose strand stood the hermitage of the sage Kardama, father of Lord Kapila, Badrikashrama, the modern Badrinatha, the river Nanda, which is shortened for Alakananda, Chitrakuta, and so on, O king, and all the principal mountain ranges such as Mahendra and Malaya, and places which are consecrated by the idols of Sri Hari. These are the holiest tracts. Surely one desirous of blessedness should repeatedly sojourn in these places, for virtue practiced here yields fruit 1,000 times more than at other places. By the seers standing foremost among the judges of worthy souls, indeed, Sri Hari and Sri Hari alone, of whom the mobile and immobile creation is surely constituted, O ruler of the earth, has been concluded to be really worthy of honor in this world. For in that Rajasuya Yajna performed by you, even in the presence even of gods, rishis, and adepts in austerities and yoga, etc., such as Sanaka and his brothers, O king, Sri Krishna, the immortal Lord, was recognized as worthy of being adored in the first instance. They made the first offering to Krishna, who was there in person, as of course they did. The great tree, in the shape of the egg-shaped universe, is crowded with multitudes of jivas. He being the root of this tree, to worship the immortal Lord is to gratify all living beings, as well as one's own self. The dwellings in the form of human beings, animals, rishis, and gods have been evolved by him. He is the Purusha, inasmuch as he dwells in these abodes in the form of the embodied soul. In these aforementioned bodies, O king, the Lord is present in different degrees, meaning that the proportion of intelligence or power manifest in them differs in degree. Hence, a human being is really deserving of honor. Human beings are worthy of respect, more or less in proportion to the degree of self-consciousness manifest in each. Perceiving the inclination among the aforesaid human souls to despise one another, O Yudhishthira, the image of Sri Hari was instituted by the wise for worship in Treta and the following yugas. It was not used in Satya Yuga. Thenceforward, some people began to worship Sri Hari in images with articles of worship, viewing them with great reverence. Though worshipped, an image does not yield the desired result to misanthropes, to people who mistreat other humans. Even among men, O King of Kings, the wise recognize a Brahmana as eminently worthy of respect. By virtue of asceticism, learning, and contentment, he preserves the Veda, constituting the body of Sri Hari. Sanctifying the three worlds with the dust of their feet, the Brahmanas, O King, are indeed worthy of great adoration, even in the eyes of Sri Krishna, the soul of the universe. Thus ends the 14th discourse, entitled An Inquiry into Right Conduct, in Book 7 of the Great and Glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And I think let's do one more, because that will finish Book 7 and kind of finish this whole section and seem like a good breaking point. So Discourse 15, An Inquiry into Right Conduct, concluded. Narada continued. Some Brahmanas are devoted to rituals laid down in the scriptures as pertaining to their grade in society and stage in life, while others, a ruler of men, are intent on the practice of austerities. Others are those that have pinned their faith in the study and teaching of the Vedas and other scriptures, while others are given to the pursuit of jnana and yoga, or devotion. By one seeking immortality, oblations of food, etc., intended for the spirit of a deceased relation on the occasion of a sraddha, as well as for gods in a ritual intended to propitiate the gods, should be offered to one devoted to the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment. In the absence of such a brahmana, the offering may be given to others according to their merit. One should feed 2 brahmanas in the course of a rite intended to propitiate the gods, and 3 in a sraddha ceremony in the interest of a deceased relative, or you could just do 1 on either occasion. Though very rich, a householder should not invite a large number of brahmanas during a sraddha feast. However rich you are, you should not invite more than 3. Due to feeding a large number and offering food to his relatives, reverence befitting the place and time, the quality of materials, a worthy recipient, and worship, these cannot be adequately ensured. if it becomes a large affair. So no matter how rich you are, only invite a maximum of 3 brahmanas, and you could even just do one to a Sraddha rite. When a place and time are available, food fit for hermits, such as wild rice, offered first to Srihari and then served with reverence and in accordance with the scriptural ordinance to a worthy recipient, yields the desired fruit and proves everlasting. Duly distributing the food among the gods, the rishis, the ancestors, and other living beings, one's own self and one's relatives, one should look upon all these as forms of the Supreme Person. One who knows the essence of piety should not offer meat to the ancestors in a Sraddha ceremony, nor should he eat it. The type of supreme gratification caused to the ancestors as well as to the Lord himself through cereals fit for anchorites, because they involve no destruction of life, is never brought about through the killing of animals. For men seeking true piety, there is no other such virtue as abstinence from violence to living beings, perpetrated through mind, speech, and body. Some wise men, foremost among the knowers of the truth about sacrifices and free from desire, offer sacrifices consisting of rituals into the fire of self-control kindled by knowledge. Seeing one proceeding to propitiate the Lord through sacrifices conducted with material substances, animals grow apprehensive lest the merciless fellow who is ignorant of the truth of the spirit and is given to the gratification of himself will surely kill them. Therefore, contented, he who knows what is right should perform from day to day obligatory and occasional duties, even with the cereals fit for hermits and obtained by force of destiny. He who knows piety should give up vidharma, paradharma, abhasa, upamadharma, and chala. These 5 offshoots of adharma should be given up as vice. Vidharma, and I will define what they are. Vidharma is that which interferes with one's own prescribed conduct, even though practiced as a virtue. While paradharma is that, so in other words, things that are good but are not what is right for you. While paradharma is that which is prescribed for another. A course of conduct recommended in a scripture opposed to the Vedas or intended to deceive another is upadharma, whereas chala is that course of conduct which is justified by distorting the sacred texts. That which has been originated by men according to their own whim, as apart from the ashramas or stages in life, is abhasa. And in whose case has a course of conduct enjoined by one's own innate disposition not proved capable of alleviating distress. In other words, that the best way of alleviating distress is to conduct yourself according to your own innate disposition. An indigent man should not endeavor to obtain wealth even for the sake of piety or for maintenance. Effortlessness proves to be a means of subsistence to a man who ceases to strive, as it does in the case of a python. How can that happiness which falls to the lot of a contented and effortless man delighting in his own self be enjoyed by one running in all directions in a quest of wealth out of greed for objects of sense? To a man ever contented in mind, all directions are full of happiness, as there is security from gravel and thorns, etc., for him whose feet are protected by shoes. With what cannot a contented man get on, O Yudhishthira, say even with water? It is due to longing for the delights of sex and the palate that a man behaves like a dog. The glory, learning, austerity, and fame of a discontented Brahmana disappear, and his wisdom gets dissipated due to the vagrancy of his senses. A man reaches the end of passion through hunger and thirst, and the end of wrath on the appearance of its sequel, violence. But he fails to reach the end of greed, even after conquering the quarters and enjoying the sovereignty of many lands. Many a learned man, possessing extensive knowledge and capable of dispelling doubts, O king, and even some heads of assemblies, descend into the depths of hell through discontent. One should conquer desire through lack of determination to gratify it, wrath by eschewing desire, greed by looking upon wealth as an evil, fear by pondering the true nature of things, grief and infatuation by distinguishing matter from spirit, hypocrisy through service to exalted souls, impediments in the path of yoga through silence, violence through inactivity of body, etc. He should get rid of pain resulting from living beings through compassion, suffering brought about by divine agencies by recourse to composure of mind, bodily distemper by dint of yogic practices, and sleep by recourse to, or sleepiness, by recourse to sattvika food. A man should conquer rajas and tamas by dint of sattva, and should conquer sattva through freedom from attachment, and indeed all these with ease through devotion to one's guru. Analogous to the bath of an elephant, which means a bath which cleans you only for a very brief time, is all sacred knowledge possessed by a man who entertains the perverted notion about his guru, who has conferred on him the light of wisdom and is no other than the Lord, that he is just a mortal like himself. Just as Sri Krishna, present before you, is the ruler, because keep in mind, Narada is saying this to Yudhishthira while Krishna is literally in the room. So present before you, is the ruler of Prakriti and Purusha, and his feet are worthy of being sought after even by masters of yoga, and yet the world looks upon him as a human being. So is the case with the Guru, who is the same as the Lord. All precepts of the nature of an ordinance solely aim at the subjugation of the five senses and the mind. Though aiming at this, they entail fruitless labor if they do not bring in their train stages of contemplation on the Lord. As pursuits like agriculture do not evidently contribute to liberation, they make for transmigration. So do sacrifices and works of public utility, such as the digging of wells, tanks, and so on, undertaken by him who has his face turned away from God, lead to metempsychosis. He who is intent, they may lead to positive reincarnation if you're dedicating yourself to public utility, but you won't get moksha that way, by that alone. He who is intent upon the subjugation of mind should become a recluse and live alone in a secluded place, free from attachment and devoid of possession, and subsisting on scanty fare obtained by begging. Arranging his seat, consisting of a mat of kusha grass covered by deerskin with a piece of cloth spread on it, O king, on a clean and level ground, one should squat on it with his body erect in a steady, straight, and easy pose, repeating the mystic syllable Om, fixing his gaze on the tip of the nose. So this has been interpreted variously, fixing the gaze on the tip of the nose. Some sadhus actually do stare cross-eyed literally at the tip of their nose while meditating for hours and hours on end. But most interpret it as the other tip of the nose, meaning the root of the nose, this end of the nose. In other words, fixing the inner gaze on the third eye. He should thoroughly control his expiration and inspiration by inhaling the air, suspending the breath, and exhaling the air, till his mind gives up indulging in diverse desires. A wise man should gradually hold in the heart his roving mind, smitten with desires, withdrawing it from all those objects towards which it goes. The mind of that striver, constantly exerting himself in this way, attains quiescence in a very short time, as a fire without fuel goes out before long. A mind which is no longer agitated by lust, etc., all whose operations have been completely set at rest, and which is immersed in the bliss of absorption into the absolute Brahman, will never feel distracted. If a recluse, having first retired from his home, a field for the culture of religious merit, worldly riches, and sensuous enjoyment, the first three objects of human pursuit, seeks after them again, he is indeed a shameless fellow, and veritably eats what has been vomited. Those very fools who thought of their body as not self, mortal and sure to be converted into ordure, reduced to the state of worms or reduced to ashes, treat it again as their self and get others to extol it. Neglect of religious duties on the part of a householder, violation of the vow of chastity, etc., on the part of a brahmachari, reversion to a village life on the part of an anchorite, and lack of self-restraint on the part of a recluse. Men guilty of these are indeed the vilest among those embracing the ashramas. They actually bring their ashrama to ridicule. Out of compassion, one should ignore such men, infatuated by the deluding potency of the Lord. If a man has come to recognize his self as one with the Supreme, he must have his cravings uprooted by this knowledge. Seeking what and for what purpose should he remain addicted to sensual pleasures and nourish his body? They speak of the body as a chariot, the senses as the horses, the mind, the ruler of the senses, as the reins, the objects of senses as the paths to be traversed, reason or understanding as the charioteer, and the intellect as his capacious seat, all made by God. They actually refer to the 10 vital airs as the axle tree, virtue and sin as the 2 wheels, the jiva identifying itself with the body as the owner of the chariot, the occupant of the chariot, the mystic syllable om as his bow, the pure self as the shaft, and the supreme itself as the mark. Attachment and aversion and cupidity meaning like lustfulness, grief and infatuation, fear, vanity, the feelings of pride and ignominy, and a carping spirit, deceitfulness, violence and jealousy, instinctive clinging to worldly life and bodily enjoyments, negligence, hunger and sleep, and so on, are the enemies to be conquered. They are born of rajas and tamas. Sometimes propensities born of sattva prove to be our enemies too. While the jiva retains the chariot in the shape of a human body with its appurtenances under his control, he should body with all its appurtenances in the shape of the senses. He should get rid of all the aforesaid enemies, wielding the sword of wisdom sharpened with the worship of the feet of most exalted souls, and finding his strength in Lord Achyuta. Sated with the bliss which constitutes his very being and tranquil, he should cast off the chariot too. Otherwise, the unruly horses in the shape of the senses inclined towards the world, as well as the charioteer in the shape of a feeble understanding, may lead the unwary occupant of the chariot astray and betray him to robbers in the shape of the objects of senses. These robbers hurl him, horses, charioteer, and all, into the pit of transmigration, dark with ignorance and beset with the great fear of death. Action recommended in the Vedas is of 2 kinds: pravrata karma, that which turns the mind towards worldly objects, and nivrata karma, that which draws the mind away from the external world and turns it inwards. By means of pravrata karma, one is likely to return to mundane existence, while through nivrata karma, one enjoys immortality. A ritual, having for its object the destruction of an enemy, such as the Vedic Shyena Yajna, the hawk sacrifice, which is a war yajna, or that conducted by means of material substances, such as Agnihotra, the daily offerings of oblations into the sacred fire, as well as Darsha, which is the bi-weekly sacrifice performed on every dark moon or new moon, and Puranamasa, the full moon yajna, Chaturmasya, which are the 3 yajnas performed at the beginning of each 4 months, an animal sacrifice, a soma sacrifice, Vaishvadeva, which is a rite performed by Vedic householders morning and evening and before the midday meal, consisting in paying homage to the Vishvedevas. And even so, Bali Karma, which is offering before the daily meal morsels of cooked food such as rice and bread to certain gods, semi-divine beings, household divinities, spirits, humans, birds, other animals, and all creatures, including even lifeless objects. Collectively, all these known as Ishta and Purta, works of public utility, such as the construction of a temple, a garden, a well, or a place where water is supplied to wayfarers and cattle, and so on. These are designated as pravrata karma if they are undertaken from interested motives and bring uneasiness as in their train. The subtle modification of material substances thrown into the fire as oblations and entering into the constitution of an ethereal body, the deities presiding over smoke, the nighttime, the waning of the moon, the winter half of the year, and the sphere of the moon, which mark the gradual ascent of the departed soul and dissolution of the ethereal body. Annual plants and creepers, food grains and vital fluid. These, O ruler of the earth, make the path of pravrata karma, known by the name of the Pitrayana or Dhuma Marga, the dark path, characterized by rebirth. The idea is that the soul of one devoted to pravrata karma here is invested after death with an ethereal body, made up of the subtle modifications of material substances thrown by him during his lifetime as oblations into the sacred fire. And united with this body, the soul gradually ascends to the sphere of the moon, being escorted on the way, one after another, by the deities presiding over smoke, the night time, the dark fortnight, and the winter half of the year. Having enjoyed the pleasures of the moon world, which is a part of heaven, Pitriloka, and thus exhausted the merit responsible for its stay there, the soul takes a downward course. As the soul falls from the moon, the ethereal body with which it was clothed in Pitriloka gets dissolved, even as the orb of the moon ceases to be visible on the dark moon, on Amavasya. Descending on earth with a raindrop, re-entering the earth during a rain at some time, the soul enters an annual plant or creeper and appears in the form of a grain. Then, finding its way and getting absorbed into the system of a male human being, it is transformed by stages into the generative fluid. It dwells in the semen of the man, which on entering a uterus and getting united with the ovum during the process of conception is gradually developed into a male or female embryo. This process of ascent and descent of a human soul devoted to pravrata karma has been outlined in the verses. Having gone through each one of these stages in the order mentioned above, the soul is reborn on this earth. A member of the twice-born classes consecrated by the purificatory rites from Garbhadhana, which is the ceremony of impregnation, down to Antyeshti, which is the funeral rites, follows this course. Those devoted to Nivrata karma, on the other hand, offer sacrifices in the form of ritual acts into the senses lighted by knowledge. Such a man merges his senses in the mind, representing the thinking faculty, the mind, full of morbid thoughts, in speech. Speech in the body of articulate sounds, the latter in the compound vowel sound om. Om in bindu, the latter in nada. Nada in prana, and the last named in the all-pervading Brahman. The deity presiding over fire, the sun, the daytime, the close of day, the deity of eventide, the bright fortnight, the full moon, the summer half of the year, and Brahma, that mark the ascent of the departed soul to Brahma Loka, the realm of Brahma, the uppermost and the subtlest sphere of this material universe, and representing the climax of material enjoyment. The Vishva, the soul identifying itself with gross matter. Tejasa, the soul identified with subtle matter. The Prajna, the soul identified with the causal matter. The Turiya, the soul standing as a witness of all these states, so called because of its being associated with each of these states. And Atma, the pure spirit. The Vedas speak of these as marking the path of the gods, also known by the name of Archirmarga, or the bright path, which culminates in liberation. Going through all these stages, one after another, the tranquil-minded votary of the Supreme Spirit, God, established in the self, never returns to this world. So here we delineate the path of the human soul devoted to Nivrata karma. Here the soul of the deceased gradually ascends to the abode of Brahma, the creator, being conducted on the way by the deities presiding over fire, the sun, the daytime, eventide, the bright fortnight, the full moon, and the summer half of the year. There it enjoys the luxuries of that realm, and finally attains liberation when Brahma does too. The latter half of this verse outlines the process of liberation, which commences with the soul, which till now was known by the name of Vishva, merging its physical body in the astral and remaining identified with the latter when it is designated as Tejasa. The Tejasa merges its astral body in the causal sheath and enjoys the title of Prajna so long as it remains identified with the causal frame. Then, merging the causal sheath in the all-witnessing self, which is united with all bodies, it assumes the title of Turiya. And finally, casting off the role of a witness too, it remains in its primary state as the pure self, or the absolute. In other words, it is shorn of all adjuncts and thus gets liberated. He who discerns these two paths, presided over by the ancestors and the gods, respectively, conclusively and distinctly made known by the Vedas, with the eye of scriptural knowledge never gives way to infatuation, even though remaining in this body. This, by the way, is why Bhishma wanted to wait until the start of the summer half of the year to die in, because it was more auspiciously in tune with the latter of these two paths. That's why he waited so long, invoking his boon on the battlefield, lying on the bed of arrows, until the summer half of the year began. As a matter of fact, he, the knower of these true paths, himself comprises what exists before and after, outside and inside all bodies, and he is the high and the low. He is the understanding as well as that which is worth knowing, the word and the thing denoted by it, darkness as well as light. Even as a reflection is taken to be real, even though disproved in every way, so all objective existence is fancied to be real, being difficult to be reconciled with reason. The psychophysical organism, which is a combination of the elements, earth and so on, is indeed none of the following possibilities. It is neither their collection, nor compound, nor even modification. It is neither distinct from them, nor pervaded by them. It is illusory. The elements, too, cannot exist apart from their finer components because of their being compounds themselves. Indeed, in the event of a compound as such being non-existent, a component, too, ultimately proves to be non-entity. The delusion about the identity of an individual persists so long as we attribute diversity to God. The injunctive and interdictory force of the sacred texts remains intact in the same way as the distinction of waking life and sleep persists in the course of a dream. Pondering the unity of thought, action, and material substances, a contemplative soul shakes off through self-realization in this life his three dreams in the shape of the three states of consciousness. To contemplate the substantial unity of causes and effects, calling them the three dreams because waking life is indeed no more real than a dream, nor is deep sleep. To contemplate the substantial unity of causes and effects on the analogy of cloth and its warp and woof, their diversity being unreal, this is called Bhagavata, unity of thought. To resign with mind, speech, and body all actions to the Supreme Spirit directly, without expecting any fruit for oneself. O son of Prita, this is what is called Kriyadvaita, unity of action. To identify one's own interests and enjoyment with those of one's wife, progeny, and other relations, as well as of all other embodied souls. This is what is called Dravyadvaita, to act in the common interests of all beings, not your own selfish interests as a separate individual. By whatever means, at whatever place and time, and from whatever source, a material is permitted to be acquired by a particular man, a protector of men, he should perform duties with that material and no other materials, except when in distress, making his living by his own duties enjoined by the Vedas and enumerated before, and other similar duties. A man blessed with devotion can attain the realm or state of Sri Krishna, who is present before you, even at home, O king. Even as you and your brothers, O King of Kings, have been able to get over a series of calamities difficult to get rid of by the grace of Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Spirit, by serving whose lotus feet you performed a number of sacrifices, having entirely subdued the elephants guarding the quarters, which is a way of saying subdued the land, so shall you cross the ocean of mundane existence also by the grace of Sri Krishna. Formerly, in the previous round of creation, I was born as a Gandharva, Upabarhana by name, highly respected among the Gandharvas. Pleasing to the eye by virtue of comeliness of form, grace, sweet voice, and fragrance, I was most beloved of women, and was constantly drunk and excessively fond of women. Once in a sacrificial session commenced by the gods, parties of Gandharvas and Apsaras were invited by the creators of the universe, Daksha, Marichi, and others, for singing the stories of Sri Hari. Coming to know of that invitation and surrounded by women, I too went there singing profane songs, even on the way without permission. Taking it to be an offense on my part, the creators of the universe cursed me by dint of their ascetic power, saying, "Shorn of splendor, attain you at once the state of a Shudra, since you have behaved disrespectfully." At once I was born of a maidservant, and through service even in that life to sages who were expounders of the Vedas, and thanks to their fellowship, I attained the state of a son of Brahma. I have explained to you the conduct prescribed for a married man, which is capable of destroying sin, and by following which a householder can speedily attain the goal of recluses. Oh, exceedingly fortunate on earth are you, to whose residences flock from all quarters sages sanctifying the world, inasmuch as the Supreme Brahman bodily stays there, disguised in the form of a human being. This very Sri Krishna, your well-known beloved friend and cousin, son of your maternal uncle, Vasudeva, your very self, worthy of your adoration, obedient servant, ambassador, and charioteer, and guru, is Brahman, the realization of absolute supreme bliss, which is diligently sought after by the great. May this Sri Krishna, the well-known protector of devotees, be gracious to us. Sri Krishna, whose essential character has not been depicted in its true colors with the help of reason, even by Lord Shiva, the source of the universe, Brahma, the lotus-born, and others, and who is adored through silent meditation and inquiry, devotion and control of the senses, and so on. Sri Shuka went on, hearing the discourse of the celestial sage Devarishi Narada, as reproduced in the foregoing verses, Emperor Yudhishthira, the foremost of the Bharatas, felt much delighted and overwhelmed with love, worshipped Narada as well as Sri Krishna. Taking leave of Sri Krishna and Yudhishthira, son of Pritha, and honored by them, the sage left. Yudhishthira felt highly amazed to hear of Sri Krishna as the supreme reality. In this way, I have related to you separately the accounts of the posterity of the daughters of Daksha, in which are comprised the orders of animate and inanimate creation, such as gods, demons, and human beings. Thus ends the 15th discourse, entitled An Inquiry into Right Conduct, forming part of the dialogue between Emperor Yudhishthira and the sage Narada, narrating the story of Prahlada, primarily, and Book 7 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita, composed by the sage Veda Vyasa and consisting of 18,000 shlokas. And that is the end of Book 7. And we can stop there for today. Thank you all very much for coming. I know this was a little bit longer than usual to finish out the book, but it felt like an appropriate conclusion for the section.
Thank you, Devla. Awesome.
Yeah, you guys can ask questions if you like. I can hang around for a bit. I see Rad is asking in the chat.
Hey, Devana, I just listened to it, and it said something about the soul goes behind the moon and all that. So
yeah,
when it falls on the ground, that means the soul travels through the food.
Yes.
On the fairness level of the man.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So the path that's described, and this is not for all souls, but it's for souls following the Vedic Pravriti path. Through performing certain Vedic rituals over the course of their life, they prepare an ethereal body for themselves. And souls that do this course of Vedic yajnas over the course of their life, upon dying, dropping this body, inhabit this new body that they built over the years through specific ritual procedures, and then take it to Pitriloka, which is on the moon, and dwell there in a lunar heaven for a period of time determined by their karma. Once they've exhausted it, their positive karma, then they fall back to earth and dwell in rain clouds in this particular ethereal body that they constructed, until at some point they fall in rain, take up residence in a plant, and will then pass it. Typically, souls that did this course of rituals and had the karma to do this are guaranteed rebirth as a human being again. And when a human eats the grain, they enter into the they're like a haunting spirit in the body of a man who eats the grain, and they dwell in his semen. And then hopefully they have the luck that they picked a householder man or someone who's going to impregnate a woman, and then they attach to the body. So this is a course that's achieved by following a specific course of the Vedic karma kanda rituals. It's not how reincarnation works for most people who don't build this ethereal body for themselves and are much more kind of cast to the winds of karma and vasana, and are likely to reincarnate in animal bodies or whatever or they too can reach heaven. They can even reach a higher heaven in Svargaloka, depending on their karma and so on. But this particular path can be almost mechanistically operated by means of a series of the Vedic karma kanda rituals. But it does lead to rebirth. It does not lead to moksha, doing it that way.
Nice. And just, yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Then the true identity is actually Paramatma, just the last section you just read. That was interesting also.
Yes.
Nice. First chapters, book 7, which chapter again?
It was the last one. What was the last number? The last number was 15.
Thank you.
Yeah, book 7. It's a book with fairly few and long chapters. It only has 15, but they're fairly lengthy.
Yeah, but it makes sense that it needs to be explained.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Devla, question.
Yeah.
So Yudhishthir felt highly amazed to hear of Sri Krishna as no other than the supreme reality.
Yeah.
When is this taking place? Is this before the great battle?
Yes.
And when did the Ekadashi dictations between Sri Krishna and Yudhishthir take place in alignment with this on the timeline?
After this.
Interesting. So this is after the battle.
This is before the battle.
Before the battle. Okay.
Long before. This discourse is at Raja Yudhishthira's Raja Suya Yagna, when he was consecrated as Maharaja of Indraprastha. So it's before the Pandavas' exile, a couple years before.
Wow.
So the Kurukshetra war will take place about 15 years after this, when the Bhagavad Gita will be revealed. And the Ekadashi discourses between Yudhishthira and Krishna were also later. All this is before. To them, at this point, Krishna to them was their clan relative and an allied prince and a great friend of theirs. And there was kind of this idea going around that he was divine or an avatar in some way. Wise sages knew who he was, but it was kind of a matter of rumors and varied beliefs and varied understandings of Krishna. He hadn't yet revealed himself openly to the world.
Amazing. And when about in the timeline of things did the Ekadashi dictations take place?
The Ekadashi dictations, I would have to check that. Most of those are given in the Padma Purana. I think that most of those were after the Kurukshetra war, when Yudhishthira was reigning as king over the united Kuru Rajya of Hastinapura and Indraprastha. If I'm remembering correctly, those were later on. So after, yeah.
Oh, nice. So the Shri Vishnu Sahasranama was after the battle, right?
Yes.
Makar Sanskranti, where Sri Hari gave Bhishma, Pitama Bhishma, the right to talk, even he was weak and all that. So that's how Sri Vishnu Sahasranama came to got enlivened, right?
Right.
How he was and all that stuff. So the Ekadash discourse is in Padmapura. Where is it? In which
most of the Ekadashi discourses are in Padma Purana. That might not be the only place they are, but it's the place that they're usually taken from. They're not in Bhagavata Purana.
Okay.
They're mentioned. The Bhagavata Purana refers to Ekadashi fasting, but it doesn't give the stories of Krishna telling Yudhishthira the story of each Ekadashi, the Vrata-kathas. The Ekadashi Vrata-kathas are all given in the Padma Purana. And those conversations took place after Yudhishthira's Raja Suya Yagna. I think they took place after the war, if I remember correctly.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah. Thank you, Devala.
Yeah. Thank all you guys.
Credit lines match well with Maharshi's knowledge also. I'm doing
absolutely.
a study with Vedic science, and they talk about the 7 stages of consciousness. And then back in book 3, it's written clearly that Vedavyas said that if you transcend the dreaming, sleeping, and waking, you actually, basically, you're done with a cycle of birth and rebirth, but you have to still evolve to higher stages of man.
And that's exactly what we just had here too, is by transcending, it specifically says by transcending the states, the ordinary 3 states of consciousness of waking, sleeping, and dreaming, you break free from the cycle of rebirth. You got into the Nivritti path, but then there is a further progression through stages to higher and higher stages. The exact same thing.
Yeah, but I like it how Maharshi gave us a simple technique to break this down, so it was like, wow.
Yeah.
Just like,
and just now in this reading, one of the sages gave essentially the same technique. They gave the mantra Om, since they were giving it for renunciates, but essentially the same thing of just putting the mind on the mantra, and whenever you've noticed that it's wandered off, just withdraw it from the sense objects to which it goes. It described essentially the same technique of transcendental meditation, pretty much explicitly in what we just read.
Well, actually, Gurudev doesn't want us to meditate on O, because if we as a householder do
exactly.
it,
that's why I mentioned that the Omkara was prescribed here, because they were talking about for ascetics.
Yeah. Very nice. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Have a wonderful week.
Yeah, you too. Happy Navaratri for everybody.
Yeah, happy Navaratri, all of you. Andy, thank you
Ma.
for always updating us for Ekadashi and everybody. See you next week.
I believe the next day, according to ISKCON calculations, the next Ekadashi is next Saturday.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the other calendar's calculation, but for ISKCON next Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
ISKCON is pretty good about it, I think. So
yeah.
Great.
All right. Yeah. Thank you all.
All right. Well, it'll be great. We'll be all like coming off of our Ekadashi cleanses on Sunday, next Sunday.
All right.
Good. Great. Thanks so much, Devala.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
Om Shanti.